Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. Today, we're finding out more information about the F-16s that will be handed over to the Ukrainians. And we think that number, both provided by Denmark and the Netherlands, could amount to a total of 40 F-16s. Now, realistically, how many F-16s will the Ukrainians have deployed by, say, the middle of next year? Well, that number right now looks to be no more than 8. And the reason for that is there are about approximately 8 Ukrainian pilots that speak English with the proficiency that would allow them to go through the training courses and then fly the aircraft. Compounding that, the Ukrainians also have current pilots that could possibly be sent, but they're being used in the war effort. And then compounding that further is the losses that the Ukrainians have sustained within its force of pilots and aircraft, but namely pilots. Now that number is classified, but we believe that the Ukrainians have lost dozens and dozens of pilots, highly trained, highly qualified pilots. The pilots, the 8 pilots that are going to be sent to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization to receive training are younger pilots that happen to speak English. So the idea that we're suddenly going to see a new Ukrainian Air Force with 40 F-16s is simply not going to occur. Best case scenario. Absolutely the best case scenario for the Ukrainians is towards the beginning of next year. The Ukrainians may have 4 to 8 operational aircraft with qualified pilots. That's it. Now, depending on how the war goes, if we fast forward 2 years, 3 years into the future, is it possible that the Ukrainians could field a much larger force of F-16s depending on the support that Ukraine gets from NATO? Yeah, it's possible. But we are talking years into the future before the Ukrainians would have a Air Force with F-16s as its centerpiece. It's not happening. So again, going into early next year, possibly we could see some sorties by Ukrainian F-16s launched from the western edges of the Ukrainian-Polish border, conducting operations, and those operations will namely be air defense operations over Lviv, Kiev, with the purpose of shooting down Russian cruise missiles. That appears to be the lead-in training that is going to take place. Not ground attack missions, not going close to the Russian border and engaging Russian aircraft. It appears that they're going to get those 8 pilots trained up and have the capability to try and shoot down Russian cruise missiles. That will be their mission. Now, is that going to give the Ukrainians new life in the east? Is it going to change what is happening in areas in the southern sector near Zaporizhia, in the east near Bakhmut, up north towards Kupiansk? No, it's not. It is not going to do that. It'll add additional air defense capability against Russian cruise missiles. But the idea that this is going to be a Ukrainian Air Force that is going to have the ability to engage the Russian Air Force is not what's occurring. 3 years into the future, maybe after some sort of ceasefire takes place, could that happen? Possibly. But we're talking years into the future, and a lot can happen in years. So we'll see what happens. The Ukrainians are continuing offensive operations in the south, running from Zaporizhia, Orikhiv, east to Volhodar. Specifically, they continue this operation just to the south of Staromayorsky and Yurzhine. We continue to see other operations by the Ukrainians near Robotyne. We continue to see Ukrainian operations in this sector as well, basically two sectors of the conflict. Again, they're not making a lot of headway. They're taking tremendous amounts of casualties. More casualties have been sustained by the Ukrainians in the last 2 months than quite possibly over the last 6 months prior to offensive operations. A lot of casualties. And we're hearing that elements within the Ukrainian military may have been hiding casualty figures from the actual the political body in Kiev, the political leadership in Kiev. And right now, it looks like certain elements in the United States within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization would like to have seen a more robust operation from the Ukrainians, a much more aggressive, dedicated operation by the Ukrainians. Now, the problem with that, again, it goes back to the leadership within the Ukrainian military understanding they did not have air superiority, air dominance. They were facing off. They were conducting operations, mechanized operations, in which Russian ground attack aircraft, attack helicopters were going after those ground forces. And the Russians, as we have talked about before, had started using more enhanced standoff munitions designed to keep attack helicopters and ground attack aircraft outside of the Ukrainian air defense envelope. Now, over the course of the last few weeks, we have seen a few Russian helicopters get shot down by Ukrainian forces. But again, the Russians are able to build those helicopters. We know the Chinese are providing optics, metals, everything that the Russians need to produce additional military instruments of war, whether it be tanks, armored infantry fighting vehicles, attack helicopters. The Russians are able to produce those items. The sanctions, the Western sanctions, while they have produced obstacles for the Russians have just found other ways to get those needed supplies to make and continue to make instruments of war. Attack helicopters, tanks, what have you. At this point, again, if we circle back to the F-16s, it's not going to make a lot of difference. Again, 3 years from now, maybe, but if we fast forward into January, February of next year, it'll be minuscule. It really will. Compounding that, we are continuing to see the Russians mobilize. Right now, it is estimated that the Russian ground forces are expanding its force construct by about 20,000 personnel per month. And that is, in fact, increasing as well. So we could start to see a period where it goes from 20,000 to 22,000, 22,000 to 25,000, and onwards. So what is the end point? What is the final end strength of the Russian military, the Russian army? It's hard to say at this point. Probably in excess of 1 million personnel, just in the ground forces. And again, the Russian military-industrial complex is improving itself. They are continuing to manufacture. Obviously, reports indicate that the Russians are now producing in 1 month what all Russian industry was able to produce in its entirety of last year. And that is going to gain efficiency and is going to get stronger, while the Ukrainian side has limited industrial capacity. That industrial capacity is able to be struck and attacked by Russian cruise missiles. Now, we have seen some Ukrainian strikes and escalations of the conflict in terms of launching drones and modified air defense missiles at targets deep inside of Russia. But ultimately, is that going to degrade the Russian industrial capacity? No, it's not. You're seeing some small pinprick strikes designed to really sap morale from the Russian citizenry, not going after real valuable military targets. Whereas the Russians have the ability to launch dozens and dozens of cruise missile strikes in a single day, and are continuing to do so, and compounding that, drone strikes and what have you. So again, very tough situation for the Ukrainians. Right now, we are seeing more or less a war of attrition starting to take place. Now, again, as we see the Russians continue to build up, that is going to change. The Russians are going to have new capability as they continue to build, as they continue to manufacture. That is going to occur. Again, you have to look back at history. While it's not exactly the same as what happened in World War II, there are similarities that do exist. So we are going to continue to watch what is happening on the ground. We will continue to report. And as always, thank you for joining us. More to come very, very soon. Have a good day.